Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Blockchain Long Story Short series from BSN Global. I'm your host, Ben York, and today we're talking with three great minds as we try to understand China's pursuits and ambitions with regards to emerging technologies. Today will be special because we're not just limited to blockchain. For those of you who don't know, which I suspect is probably everyone, I'm a regular contributor to leading blockchain media company Cointelegraph, specifically for China-related news. I also hold a full-time position with digital asset trading firm WuTrade, and I lived and worked in China for over a decade. But enough about me. I think I'll be taking a backseat today to our three talented speakers, which includes Paul Schulte of Schulte Research. He's also the author of a book titled The Digital Transformation of Property in China 2021. Also today is Winston Ma, the chairman of the advisory board for Threefold, and he's the author of The Digital War, How China's Tech Powers Shape the Future of AI, Blockchain, and Cyberspace. And finally, it would not be a BSN panel without Yifan. He is the CEO of Red Date and the executive director of BSN Development Association. Now, before I let them introduce themselves, I'd like to remind everyone that you can find more information down in the video description, including the BSN website, the LinkedIn, and of course the Twitter, which is at BSN Base. So why don't we go ahead and start today with Paul? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your involvement in the tech space?
Okay, so I've been working out in Asia off and on, mostly on since 1992. So this is my seventh five-year plan that I've been looking at for China. I've been working in some of the top investment banks and research in Credit Suisse, Lehman Brothers, Nomura. I spent 2 years in China Construction Bank, and I've had my own independent research company for 10 years. I just finished a book called The Digital Transformation of Property in Greater China. And this is all about how finance and insurance is basically gluing onto the world of digitized buildings, digitized smart cities. And this leads to the tokenization and trading of more digital assets than we can ever think of, starting right about now, and being led by China.
Next, we can have Winston give a short introduction.
Sure thing. Thank you, Ben. Today our topic is about the Internet of Blockchain, right? And for my last 2-decade professional career path, it was all about connectivities. Especially between China and the US. My education I had education both in the US and China, and it started with Fudan University electronic materials major. Then after NYU Law School, I became a lawyer both in China and in New York. And then I had the Wall Street training in New York, JP Morgan, Barclays, before I had my most recent 10 years at the CIC, China's sovereign investment fund for global investing. Now I'm back in New York, back to the Wall Street. I work on VC fund, SPAC transactions, and also board positions in blockchain companies like Threefold. Back to you, Ben.
All right. Thanks, Winston. That's very good. So we have both of you with very strong financial backgrounds, but also leading into the legal side as well. So this should be pretty interesting. Our last guest to introduce himself, Yifan He. I guess you can go ahead. You're a pro at this. You can tell us more.
Okay. First, I got involved in the startup in 1998. I founded my first internet company in New York. So and raised couple $1 million and built the website and got like 500,000 Chinese visitors to the website around 2000. Then I got my MBA, and then I moved back to China and spent next 10 years on private equity. So I look into a lot of companies in China, tech companies, all kind of companies, not only TMT. And in 2014, I basically came back from investment to start again and founded Red Date Technology. In the beginning, we focused on the smart city project, basically building platforms for the cities and integrate all the data into one platform, and for the websites, apps, they can access APIs and access all the data they need from one single city. So then in 2018, we began to involve in blockchain technology. So we realized it's an amazing technology. Will change, at least change the internet, upgrade the internet. So we, by working with China Mobile, China UnionPay, and the State Information Center, we begin the plan to build the BSN. So what we're trying to do is build the infrastructure, because at this stage, it's not really need to focus on the real applications. At this stage, just like early internet, we need more and more people to test the technology. So that's the original plan for BSN, build a network for people, very easy to develop and deploy their application, because we don't believe this is the final stage of blockchain technology. So we want more and more people get involved, to innovate, to build applications, even try the technology. Eventually, it will mature into something totally new. Yeah.
That's quite interesting, because a lot of times the buzzword we see is mass adoption and people pushing for this. So yeah, you're taking more of an academic or experimental philosophy towards it. I think that's very interesting, and maybe that'll come back into play in some of these topics we talk about later. But why don't we start with a good point for maybe some historical reference here, because the tech policies with regards to China have taken a very strong direction now. So I'm curious, since all three of you are very experienced in this field, is this something that we've been seeing for a long time? Is this the culmination of a long line of policies, or is this something that only, we've started to see very recently? I think maybe we could start with Paul, because, he was talking a lot about his experience in China. So why don't you go ahead and take a stab at this?
Yeah, so, the forward of my book is a forward written by David Lee, who's a blockchain guru in Singapore, and Yifan knows him very well. And so David Lee's forward basically says that one of the reasons why China was in the dark ages for so long was that it was embroiled by civil war and, of course, colonial occupation. And so David's warning to the United States is basically, don't get involved in a civil war, because when you get involved in civil wars, you miss out on technological revolutions. China missed the first, second, and third technological revolution. The second and third, clearly due to civil war and civil unrest, right? And so the U.S. is embroiled in kind of its own sort of, low-grade civil war right now. And so, David's warning is, be careful, because when you get involved in these kinds of domestic turmoil, you can miss out on technological revolutions. Right now, China has a lot of the great technology in the world and terrible soft power. The United States has great soft power and is behind in technology. And so you're seeing these two, an immovable force and an irresistible object coming at each other right now.
Okay. Paul, just can you real quickly I don't think you mentioned your nationality. You are?
I am born in America. I'm an Irish person.
Okay. So very diverse. That's very interesting. All right. Winston, did you want to add on anything there?
Sure. I think relating to tech policies in China, it is now at the center and the front line of China's economic model. And this is a relatively new phenomenon, especially coming from the start of the new administration of President Xi, literally in 2013, because that was the time China came up with the term information consumption, which had the background of China turning away from import-export driven economic model into a more consumption and innovation driven model, right? And in connection with that, information consumption policy means to promote information technology to drive more consumption and later, more innovation from the Chinese economy. So, you mentioned my recent book, right? Actually, my earlier book, 2016 book, was titled China's Mobile Economy. As a result of the information consumption policy, China focused on the spread of smartphones, internet connectivities, mobile payments, and user traffic online, right? And all of these has built up this powerful infrastructure, huge data infrastructure that led to my recent book, 2021 book, titled The Digital War, How China's Tech Power shapes the future of AI, blockchain, and cyberspace, because all the data coming from the initial mobile internet economy will become this precious oil for the future digital economy built upon AI, blockchain, cloud, and more digital technologies.
Okay, so there's a lot of points there that I think we could talk about a little bit later on, but why don't we go ahead and let Yifan have an attempt at this topic?
Okay, China and the technology. This is a topic we can discuss, for past 2,000 years. Okay, because it's in the 99% of the time in past 2,000 years, Chinese culture doesn't really value technology. Okay, that really happened. It's after the modern reform after 1978. So because really China was far behind than other countries, then it began to chase. There's a lot of policies, in the 80s, 90s, to train more and more people to get all the university, back, into normal and, train people with technology. But with that kind of situation, okay, and all other world has been, had been, advancing for almost half century. So at that time, what China can do to fit in the world stage is basically building applications, which means we didn't have that kind of experience with research, with fundamental research. So what we can do quickly is build applications that actually become something the US really liked. Okay, from my understanding, it's we do all the research, we hold all the IPs, and China, you just build application for us, and then you capture the little value, and we capture the most value. Like iPhone, really, what kind of profit we can make in China even today is probably 1% of the total value of iPhone. So, but slowly, when China become the best country to build applications, then slowly, we are not satisfied with the value we capture. Then we want to move, into more fundamental things. That's why I think right now it's natural order for things to evolve. So in past 10 years, the Chinese government begin, to focus on more and more into fundamental research, underlying technology, and stuff like that. And at the same time, still from my personal, understanding is then the US feel the pressure. Basically, they are not only building application for us, they are trying to compete with us on the underlying research. That's why the US, in past 5 years, 10 years, US become more and more, trying to
defensive.
Yeah, and the China is also emphasize technology more and more stronger. So that's, I think, the whole thing begins because, the position that US want China to be, China doesn't want that anymore. So that's, I think that's how the whole thing began.
Yeah, and don't worry about the geopolitical stuff. Don't hold back. We want to get the real opinions out of you. So, I noticed you holding back a little there, but go ahead and speak your mind. Okay, we got the historical context here. What about like the actual strategies? I know, Paul, you mentioned that you've been through 7 5-year plans now. So as you look back at them and leading up specifically to the situation now, would you say that China is succeeding? And if so, what are some examples or areas that they're really, winning at?
Oh, so for instance, I wrote a book on this last year, which was all about the emergence of 5G and what's happening with American millennials and how America can catch up. But clearly in the area of 5G, AT&T and Verizon have pretty much dropped the ball in America and are very far behind and are basically focusing on consumer applications of 5G, which I think is going down the wrong dark alley. You want to have industrial and commercial and logistical uses of 5G. So that's one area. The other area, which is critically important in my background in banking and fintech, which I've been looking at for 7 years, I wrote a book on fintech in 2013. This so reminds me of what's going on, in the way that property assets are being digitized right now in China via the BSN, the e-currency, and 5G. This is really a powerful revolution, far more powerful than fintech. And so the combination of cloud services, edge technology, 5G, the BSN, and the e-currency for the CNY, the Fed is still chasing its tail right now and is giving out very incoherent signals on what it's trying to achieve with its own Fed coin, with some sort of international arrangement for what kind of public-private arrangement they're going to have for rolling out this coin, with 5G, with edge technology, with smart cities. Basically, they're very behind in all of these areas relative to China.
Okay, yeah, Paul, you're a very colorful speaker, so it's great to hear you describe all these things. Winston, is there anything you wanted to add on? You're on mute. You might have to unmute.
Sure. No, I think when you look at the China strategy, it can be summarized by two terms: government, like major vision, and government funding, right? And there's a term in China called 集中力量办大事, right? That means aggregate national resources to focus on major tasks, right? So this is the China strategy overall. Now, some areas that part is quite successful. A good example is AI, right? 3 years ago, China hosted the historical Go chess match between the best human player and the AI algorithm developed by the DeepMind lab of Google. And of course, the AI algorithm beat the best human player in the world 3-0, right? No suspense. And then maybe a coincidence, but just within a few months, China came up with a AI development plan 2030, calling China to become the unquestionable global AI leadership by 2030, right? And the last couple of years, we have seen, China putting large amount of resources into the AI research and in related industries. And there are a good number of AI startups have emerged in China, which can really compete with the AI companies in the US. But some areas may be less successful, still a long way to go. So for example, semiconductor, right? Speaking of my CIC sovereign wealth fund background, we even see a dedicated sovereign investment fund for semiconductor set up by the central government, led by CDB Bank, right, as the major kind of capital source. It was a close to $30 billion semiconductor fund, and it has put in lots of efforts to promote semiconductor related R&D in China. It has some progress, but still it's a long way to go because it's such a complex global supply chain, right? So I would say, this is a very powerful structure, powerful policy strategy, and we have seen some successes, but overall we still have to see it can make progress in the most critical technology breakthroughs, such as semiconductor.
Okay, that's interesting. And it's good that you gave us a little bit on both sides so we could see there. I think we should, definitely let Yifan talk about this because you're at the heart of, the Chinese blockchain industry. So, you're seeing firsthand the effect that a powerful top-down, national policy, the effect it has. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that or any other topic, of course. I'm not too picky.
Yeah, I still want to emphasize what China really wants from technology. Like I said, from any technology, there's always, starting from research, from series, then from a prototype, then you build, the components, 5 layers of components. Eventually, put everything together, become the final product. In past the 30 years, what is the best is put final product together. It's for many things we couldn't even build the component like chips, right? Even today. So what the Chinese strategy is in next 50 years or 100 years, we need to move from the final product to the research, all the way to the research. That's not a 10-year plan. Okay, that's 100-year plan at least. Because for the fundamental research, it's not, you cannot build that overnight. But I give you an example how good China is, by building applications. If you go to Shenzhen, go to Huaqiangbei, okay, it's a big market, one building. You go to the building, you don't leave the building. You can find the vendors from design a cell phone to purchasing all the components and manufacture the cell phone. You can just make your own brand of cell phone in 3 weeks, and they finish the manufacture for you, okay, without leaving that building. So that's how powerful China is by building things. But that's actually, if you go through all the value chain and the supply chain, you see the least value is captured in building the applications. Okay, the most value actually is captured in the component nobody else can build. So that's why this is still no matter how people fighting over the technology, eventually it's economic factor, because we put all. I mean, by the value, what I mean is basically the value generated per man per hour. Which means, if you design chips, you still put in 1 hour, but that value creates is $10,000. And if you build an application, you put in 1 man, 1 hour, you create $10. So eventually it's, can you make people in your country to build things much, much valuable with, averagely. So that's what China really, really tries to push in next, like I said, 50 years, 100 years. Eventually, we otherwise, we basically become, if we don't act now, we basically become a pure label for Western countries. They capture everything, we just have enough to eat. So that's actually, I think that's the fundamental reason.
That's a great point, Yifan, which echoes my point about the semiconductor chips industry topic, right? China has made progress in chip design, but eventually you have to manufacture it. And actually, the chips related to chips, it is probably the place where China spend most of the import money is. Last year, China spent more than $300 billion on importing semiconductor chips. And this is the area that is where Yifan referred to as high value added, high income industries, right? That's where China wants to be in.
And then also, Ben, just to pick up on that, that when we were researching the book and we were looking at the origins of the technological evolution in America versus China, one of the things that we don't understand very well, and there's this cognitive dissonance in the political discussion right now in America. I worked in the Reagan White House, and Ronald Reagan today would be considered like a communist because there was a huge amount of public-private partnership all the way into the 90s. And in fact, the atomic bomb and the Apollo program and the computer and SDI, when I was working at the White House, all of these programs were all public-private partnerships between foundations, universities, private companies, and the government and the Pentagon. And that's how. And where did China get its ideas for this? It got it from America. This is very clear, right? It got its ideas on technological evolution on Winston's great phrase in Chinese, which is exactly what America was doing with the interstate highway system, the atomic bomb, the PC, the development of the internet came from ARPA, right? CIA's InQtel private equity fund, funded Google, right? Many of the top people at Intel were from the CIA. These are all facts that are indisputable. When I was working at the White House, come on, a lot of the stuff that was going on between the intelligence agencies and the private sector, the purpose of the intelligence agencies wasn't to write reports. It was to get goods to hand over to the private sector. And so we got to be very clear about, what we're talking about here when, America says that China's, cheating because it's got public-private partnership with the military, Well, guess how the U.S. is intending to catch up? Public-private partnership with the military, and that's what's going on right now. And so there's a lot of irony and hypocrisy here going on, and I think that may color part of the conversation going forward.
Anyone else want to jump into that? We got into the geopolitics thing again, so I think it's a good conversation to keep going. So,
personally, I think this is actually still personal opinion. I think what U.S. is doing is totally wrong strategy right now. Okay, in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000, what they do is I don't care what China is doing. Whatever you want to do, I give you technology, you build an application for us. So basically, is I don't, I just supply everything. So it actually train the Chinese people get used to just applications, because we don't even think about going deeper because it took a lot of time and energy and investment. So we just enjoy our life and doing what we're good at. But in past 10 years, the US basically said, okay, I give you huge pressure. Even you want to build application, I don't supply everything you need, Then that's actually, personally, I think that's a wrong strategy. That actually, from a US perspective, okay, from China, actually, I think that's very good for China because when the government feel pressure, we act, okay? We act in the right way. We begin invest a lot into the fundamental research, invest a lot into education because we feel the threat and we need to build our own. We cannot buy, whole chalk us by the I mean, that's totally wrong strategy from US. You basically helping Chinese government to do the right thing. Okay, that's I still think this whole thing probably start from Trump, who is not that smart from my perspective, my understanding.
Great points from both Yifan and Paul, right? To summarize, essentially, one. That last couple of years, U.S. mostly just focused on being defensive, without thinking about their own innovation policy. So most of the focus of the Trump administration was to tighten up national security law review for cross-border investments from China capital, right? And another aspect is, we're just starting to see, from the Biden administration, to focus more on R&D in the U.S. By U.S. itself. We're seeing this, but frankly, from a China perspective, I think that's still far from what China is doing. Back to our blockchain topic, right? 2019, President Xi made a statement that blockchain is a critical technology, and called China industries to make effort to grasp the opportunity to be a global leadership, right? And this marked the first global major economy leader to endorse blockchain, a much hyped but not fully proven technology, right? For comparison, most of the Western leadership are more conservative on blockchain technologies or even any technologies, right? So still today, right? We haven't seen as much effort on technology policy from the Biden administration as compared to the China's. So it's just a different level of focus on the future digital economy.
All right, Paul, I think you have something you wanted to jump in there with, or I saw you.
Well, yeah, I think these are all great points. And my co-author of my last book was in Shanghai at the time that Huawei was getting cut to pieces by the Trump administration. And his view was, I said, what's everyone thinking in Shanghai? And they're thinking exactly what Yifan said. China will never, ever let this happen ever again. We will never be caught with our pants down ever again with what the U.S. has done to Huawei and to many other companies. And so this was a kind of a hyper reaction to having basically Huawei being shot down. And so I think, by the way, I think in the last week or two, we had a little bit of a rehearsal call last week with the four of us, but I think in the last week or so, I get a very clear sense that Biden's going to go down a much more aggressive road than anybody expected. Because look, you've got, Nancy Pelosi, who's the Speaker of the House, is Democrat, Chuck Schumer, Democrats, leader of the Senate. They are fire breathers. Nancy Pelosi is a fire breather on China. And so don't expect the Democratic Party to go 1 inch to the left based upon where Trump left. So that's something that everyone's going to have to live with. And I think that where this is going is that China's going to have to figure out a much more subtle, sophisticated, a much more comfortable and confident element of soft power in order to push its technological, all the technological gain that it has, or it's going to lose that technological gain because of a lack of realization of how sort of ham-fisted it comes across so often in trying to assert soft power. So I think that's a good way to go down this, because what is this all about? This is all about cities. This is the control of cities along the Silk Road. And right now, with the super apps, with BSN potentially, but certainly with the super apps, with what Alibaba and Tencent have, a lot of the economic systems of the Silk Road are locked up, in China's favor. And so in order to keep that, there's going to have to be a hell of a lot more advancement in soft power. I think also China did something this week that was really smart. China said, okay, if the U.S. is going to raise corporate taxes, we're going to cut corporate taxes. So, things like this are sort of taking the high road and fighting fire with fire, showing your capitalist credentials in a funny way, being sort of the capitalist roader, if you like, right? Is a weird way that China gets an upper hand here, even though, you still have some of these, these wolves who are barking and causing a lot of noise and not a lot of heat.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm torn between jumping back into the smart cities and the blockchain, but I have to ask, right now is the view on the Biden administration, from your perspectives with regards specifically to technology and policy?
Yeah, I can quickly add to what Paul just said. At the time of Trump-Biden transition, lots of people expected that Biden will remove all the tech policies against China, terminate the executive orders from President Trump, so on and so forth, right? But in reality, that did not happen. I think that's because within the U.S. there has been this consensus that China and the U.S. are in a tech war, or at least in a fierce tech competition. So what we see is the two innovation centers are looking increasingly similar to each other, which is really interesting. In the past, and I think probably Yifan already covered a little bit of that. In the past 10 years, China was mostly a innovation market for market size and application distribution. What I mean is, during the last 10 years, China copied a lot of US innovation models, especially in the internet industries. So for example, Baidu was the China version of Google. Alibaba started as a copy of eBay, so on and so forth, right? But now, the China market has become an innovation center itself. And it's not only about new business models anymore, it's about new digital technologies. So Alibaba may started as a eBay version, right? But today, Alibaba is also a powerhouse for digital technologies, such as cloud, such as AI. And globally, it has more blockchain patent applications than any other company, right? So what we're seeing today is that the two innovation centers are at the same starting line to compete for the same technology leadership in AI, blockchain, cloud, and more, right? So this is sort of the background for us to understand that the Biden administration will not easily transition away from the Trump administration. Instead, it will accelerate the efforts within the U.S. to compete with China. Yifan, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with Winston. It's first, Trump did the whole thing. It changes the concept of the U.S. population. So it's a Biden administration really, it's almost impossible now to turn away from that because it's totally against the U.S. population's understanding and idea. So, but this is why I say it's a best way for China. Don't think this is challenge. This is actually helping China. Still, like when you are a person, right? You do a little bit money and you do a little bit work and you make enough money to enjoy a good life. People don't really work hard and try to find new ways to innovate. But when suddenly you are losing your business model and you cannot get anything you want to build your life on, then you basically invest more and more into, to find new ways. I mean, before Trump, it's, the Bush, Obama and the Clinton, administrations, they what kind of policy is that? Basically, China, you want anything, we give it to you, okay? Build everything for us. And U.S. people can enjoy very, very low-priced merchandises. Even today in New York, you buy the same thing; it's cheaper than in Beijing and Shanghai. Why? Why? Because basically, it's China is consume energy is very, very low cost. The manpower is very, very low cost, and the pollution, environmental cost is very, very low. Then that's how, the U.S. people can enjoy low-priced merchandise. And that actually helped the U.S. past at least 20 or 30 years. So that's why it's, U.S. can continue to do that, but now they don't do that. They basically said, okay, we don't want to give you anything. So you need to build everything by your own. We will feel difficulties in past 10 years, in next 10 years, okay? But slowly, for 100-year plan of China, this is good, okay? Because Chinese people are smart enough. As long as you give us pressure, we'll begin moving in the right direction. So I think all those think tanks in the US really need to rethink their strategy. Okay, now you guys are wrong, but it's good for China, okay?
Those are all fantastic points. I so agree. The thing that I thought was interesting last week was on the same day that Biden announced his meeting with Putin, Avril Haines, the national security advisor, basically said that the whole idea of China as a sort of a strategic cooperation is now gone. This is a strategic competitor. And at the same time, they announced a meeting with Biden and Putin. America's trying to divide and conquer. America's trying to divide up China's relationship with Russia because Russia is not a threat to America. China is a profound threat. And I'll tell you where I think it started. I have an investment in a quantum communications company in Washington, D.C. And the guy that I talked to was a wonderful guy. And he said, Paul, I can tell you when this all started. The day that a satellite was fired from China into space and it was capable of doing quantum communications in space was the day that America freaked out. That was the strategic freak out of America saying, oh my God, we can't even do, all America could do at the time was line of sight quantum communications and then barely. And China was doing quantum communications in space. These are unbreakable codes. And this makes all the National Security Agency and those characters extremely uncomfortable because they've already broken everybody's code. And when you have an unbreakable code, this causes a freak out. That's why America created the Space Force thing that everyone's sort of been giggling about. But nonetheless, I think that was where, and then you have 5G on top of that, and then you have edge computing on top of that, and then you have a highly competent cloud, and then you have a central bank coin that's been, researched for 7 years. China's been on this 7 years. Federal Reserve hasn't even started. And then BSN comes along, and it's like, holy cow, we're behind in everything. We need to really get with the program. What I find, remarkable is, Pete Buttigieg, who's a great guy, who's the Secretary of Commerce, is bragging that the infrastructure build out of America finally has begun. They're going to replace lead pipes. And I'm like, what? Wait a minute. Where's the whole like 5G thing and the central bank coin thing and the the edge computing thing and smart cities? And America, I'm afraid, is quite far away from that. And I'm looking at the bickering between the Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate. And they're like $2 trillion away from a deal right now. They're a million miles difference in how they think about government, how much they want to spend, what they want to achieve, and so forth. So as Biden's administration goes along, I want to be, sort of rooting. I want to have an equal fight here. But what we're seeing is, unfortunately, a situation where this deep-seated divisions in society are preventing Congress from doing anything that's going to be sustainable in a quick period of time. And you need sustainability quickly, massive, a lot, technological innovation like pronto, and we're not seeing it.
Yeah.
All right, Paul. Go ahead, Yifan.
Yeah. I think one thing, like I said, the Chinese government is really trying to move, into underlying technology, not only applications. Then there's two actually strategy here. One is existing technology. Like I said, they need to make right policy starting from education, and for next 50 years, 100 years, probably we can catch up, but we need to start now. Okay. But the second strategy is for new technology. Everybody is on the same starting line. Then I think this is exactly why the China picked blockchain as one of the national strategy, because everybody on the same starting point. Mm-hmm. And I think even for blockchain, China is really move forward. Not because like BSN or something, it's really the understanding. In China, it's illegal to do cryptocurrency. But someone in the central government really understood what blockchain is. What it can do besides cryptocurrency. That's why, entire country focus on this. And this year, the government put a lot of money into research, a lot of money into building, trials, building beta version of stuff. So that's also the second strategy. So trust me, in next 10 years, any new technology emerge, China will pay a lot of attention to it. So because that's where we can beat other country in 10 years, not 50 years, not 100 years. For example, for semiconductor, we probably need 20 years, 30 years, even 50 years, because everybody move forward. We need to catch up. But for new technology, it probably 10 years or 5 years, or even in 3 years, we already become the leading country for that technology. So there's actually two strategies here. Yeah.
Okay, I have two questions, and they address two different points. The first one, I guess, maybe back for Yifan. I mean, do you feel like the way China attaches onto new technologies, is there somebody really intelligent pulling the strings, or are they just approaching every technology with the same approach, which is we're going to figure out if it's useful and then go from there? What is your opinion on that?
Firstly, I think for the proven technology, like I said, that was what I said. The first strategy is it doesn't need to pick. It basically invest in actually in education and a lot of SOEs and the private enterprise to basically push forward. Like I said, it probably needs 20 years. But for new technology, I think the Chinese government basically testing everything. But there's definitely a group of people or multiple group of people is monitoring everything very closely and understand everything very deeply. That's why they, once something they can feel this new technology will have a huge impact in the future, then they immediately move to that direction. I mean, technology probably will become the number one national policy in the next 5 years. Number one, okay. Right now, probably not number one yet, but it will be number one. And you will see a lot of new technology China will leading. Especially those technologies not mostly built upon existing technology, because it's always some new technology based on the old technology. But like blockchain technology, it's new. Probably only like 20%, 30% is building on some existing technology, which is open source and in public domain. So that's really you just ask a very, very good question. It's picking which new technology to invest is actually a very, very important thing for the governments, to pay attention to. If you pick the wrong one, you waste a lot of resources for next 10 years or 20 years.
Okay. I guess my next question, maybe this one, Winston, you've been sitting there for a while, and I could see that you're thinking some things. Paul is talking a little bit about how far behind the U.S. is. And do you see, because this is such a systematic problem, with the 4-year cycles and the two parties, are they going to be able to break out of this cycle of, one party doing something and the next party trying to undermine it? Or is China destined to take the lead here?
Oh, I think to your question, the comparison is really obvious here. To Yifan's point, right? China almost puts technology as the number one policy right now. When you look at the national government report, just a few months back, like in March, the latest 5-year plan plans to have 8% R&D budget increase every year, between 2021 to 2025. That's very interesting because it's also the same 4 years for the Biden administration, right? So can we expect the same kind of focus from the U.S. side? So far we have not seen that, right? But the U.S. has taken actions, right? Don't get me wrong. I think that China should take notice that the Biden administration has really corrected the defense-only policy of Trump administration and moved into a more offensive, more forward-thinking context. First, it came up with the executive order to develop semiconductor manufacturing facilities in the U.S., right? Because just like China wants to be independent, U.S. wants to be self-reliant as well, relating to the semiconductor supply chain. And then secondly, U.S. has set up this lots of similar sovereign investment vehicles. Just like China set up semiconductor fund to promote chip designs, U.S. has set up nationally funded sovereign investment funds for 5G. The mission is to develop technologies that can provide as an alternative to Huawei technologies for the U.S. and its allies. And more broadly, thirdly, is the new Endless Frontier Act, right, from the U.S., which says, in many new technologies, we will aim to stay in the leadership position. And this is the time we need to promote and invest in more and more US-based technology innovations, right? So I think there is still a lag between the US and China in terms of the focus on tech-driven national policy, but the US is catching up.
And also, Ben, that's a great point that Winston makes. A lot of this is going to come out of the Pentagon. The problem that we have in the technology world is that Google and Amazon have massive R&D budgets that are very secret, and Amazon has a very important smart city initiative. The problem is, if these guys build it, they own it. And how do you deal with strategically important, infrastructure which is owned by a private company and is subject to a lot of abuse? And so no one has an answer for that right now. But let me tell you something I think is even more important. And that is that I have done a lot of briefings to the PBOC, the NDRC. I've briefed all of Winston's colleagues at CIC like 100 times in their beautiful Poly building. These guys show up prepared. They show up hungry. They show up ready. They show up with doing all the homework. They listen the entire time. I could be there for 2.5 hours and every single person will be in the room at the end of 2.5 hours. Let me tell you a briefing I had with the Minneapolis Federal Reserve team in Hong Kong about 3 years ago. I was going through all the stuff that the Tencent and Alibaba and Baidu and all these guys are doing. And the guy said, you know what you have to do? You need to close your PowerPoint right now, because you know what we're dealing with? We're dealing in Minneapolis trying to get people to stop using paper checks. And I was like, well, why didn't you come here more prepared to get better use of my time than me wasting my time and your time by telling me about your headache with paper checks? That's not the way you walk into a meeting. And so there's a big difference. And believe me, I briefed people in London too in the Exchequer. And these guys in Beijing can run circles around these people. So there's a mojo that's happening in China that I feel like America had in the 70s and the 60s. That was like a military mojo. And I think whatever happened, in the 1990s when America went crazy with the Tea Party, a lot of that's been blown up. And so I think we're getting back to a little bit of a military mojo, which of course is hypocritical because that's exactly what the US was doing, criticizing Huawei for because of its ties to the, PLA. And so, there's a lot of absurdity in the conversation here, but I feel like, it's hard to get your mojo back. When you're in imperial decline, it is very hard to get your mojo back. And right now, China's got mojo and America's trying to get it back. And we have to see what's going to happen here.
Yeah. All right.
I think,
go ahead, Yifan.
One thing I want to emphasize is the way that China and the US do things differently. Those two are totally different. Governments, different social structure, stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. The US still, the best country on technology. The government policy right now is seem a little bit uncertain, but the private sector, universities, they are still the best in the world to develop the technology. But they are totally, especially those private corporations, they are market oriented, which means for any new technology, if they don't generate enough revenue and profit, they don't really push that forward. For example, IBM and Microsoft just shut down their blockchain team and the enterprise blockchain. Why? Because it's so early, it doesn't make a lot of money. Then they just shut down it. Can you believe that? It's like in 1995, someone say, okay, the internet, we build a website, doesn't make money, let's shut it down. So it's but in China, it's especially for government and SOE, they are not 100% market oriented, which means if this is government policy, then even we don't make money, let's invest and push forward. That's why, for China, the best, and the most efficient way for technology strategy, just like we discussed, picking the new technology for the future. So then, for the government and SOEs and the private sector, they all invest into it, even it doesn't really make money for now. But the Chinese government is motivated to do that. But in the US, no one is doing that until they see revenue and profit in the market. So this is actually I think if we put this is as a strategy, then it's the China, it could be wrong, you basically bet on the wrong technology, with a lot of money, but let's do that with all the emerging technology. And
that's a great point. That's a great point. And I would go further than that. I would say that America's twofold change in capital stock is what we've been talking about for the last hour. The change in capital stock in China is human and technological. The change in capital stock in America has been through tax cuts and stock buybacks. And, I know for a fact that my co-author had worked with Verizon and AT&T inside these companies for the last few years. Exactly what Yifan just said. AT&T and Verizon and these other companies that were supposed to be involved in 5G and IoT, they shut it down because it wasn't making any money. They would hire 500 people and they would go for 18 months and then they would shut it down because it can't make money. So why do it? And my friend was made redundant twice. And then he goes down to Mexico City and he's working on an AT&T contract. I call him in Mexico City and I'm like, what's going on? He said, it's really weird here in Mexico City. I said, what's the matter? He said, everyone speaks Chinese. They're Huawei people. They work 6 days a week and they work like 14 hours a day. And I'm like, that's not good. And so we're talking about America's got to change its understanding of capital stock beyond stock buybacks. This is what's going to have to change here, right? And this has huge implications for the stock market.
Yeah, and also, like I said, the U.S. is still the best in technology. Same thing, no matter what kind of strategy China uses, there still will be a lot challenges. It's especially if we want to not on the application level go deeper. That need a lot of technical people. We need a lot, fundamental knowledge. We need to do a lot of tests. We need, there's just whole lot of things. But you can see one thing, everything starts from education. You need to build a much more efficient education system to educate people for next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. We have manpower, we have enough knowledge to begin, go to that way. You can see there's a lot of activities in the education reform. You can read even news every single day in China. So that's why I'm so glad. Actually 10 years ago I was a little, I was worried, how the Chinese technology will go. But today I'm glad because everything is on the right track. You can say it will be very slow. Don't get me wrong. We probably won't see, a lot of things in 10 years, but this, as long as it's in the right track, for next 50 years, 100 years, you will see huge difference in 3-5 generations. I don't worry about slow, but they need to be on the right track. Right now, with help from U.S. government, we are on the right track now.
Okay. Yeah, we're getting close to the end of the hour, so I'd be very curious to hear some more forward-thinking statements, some predictions perhaps about the implications of current policies and where you kind of see all of this going. So why don't we start with Winston, put you on the spot here. If you have any predictions or maybe things that you covered in your book that would be, of interest to the listeners.
I think the headline here is that the tech war between China and the U.S. is real and accelerating. So as a result, we are seeing a serious decoupling in many areas, right? So as we said, as we already discussed, that for the semiconductor global supply chain, both countries want to be more self-reliant. And for a cross-border data flow, we will see increasing regulations from both sides to be more localized, right? TikTok needs to be handled by the US, and Tesla's data collected by the cars in China must be stored in China, things like that, right? So we will see more and more decoupling, frankly. But here, the blockchain world, right, give us some hope that maybe this will be another version of new internet for us to continue that global connectivities. I would think there is at least one area that China and the U.S. are looking at it, eye to eye, which is big tech regulations, right? For both countries, the large tech companies are becoming so big, so profitable, so powerful, that they almost become a challenge to the overall innovation in the economies. That's why we see in China, antitrust actions are already taken on the large tech companies, and probably in the U.S., some similar actions will be taken. Just also, right, similarly to make the U.S. ecosystem more competitive. Promote more small startups to come up to challenge the incumbent. So at least, I'm positive, for big tech regulations, at least that's one area that China and the US will collaborate.
Okay, that's interesting. Paul, do you have anything you want to tack on from a prediction standpoint?
Yeah, so I think the next phase is prop tech, and Yifan is right in the middle of this with BSN. It's basically gluing on financial services and insurance services onto digitize buildings as they are built out, whether it's residential, commercial, logistics. Companies like JD.com and Ping An Insurance are lying in the middle of this. I think Alibaba's got its own set of problems, but I think Ping An and JD are two companies that are right in the middle of this. I think BSN is a riveting, fascinating thing to pay attention to. I think there's two areas of cooperation between the U.S. and China, which are going to be very powerful. Look at J.P. Morgan and BlackRock, the largest fund manager and the largest bank in the country, are jumping into China with both feet. Wall Street is not going to decouple from China, even if Washington, D.C. does. And that's the way things have kind of always done with adversaries. The last thing I would say is, and I worked inside the White House, America can fight very dirty. And so, America's going to try divide and conquer between China and Russia, and divide and conquer internally. And I think that's a very dangerous game, but that's what they're going to try to do. And in the meantime, China has got to get better on soft power. The whole last chapter of my book is all about what China can do in terms of soft power. There's 180 things you can do in terms of foundations, charities, nonprofit organizations, donations, all kinds of governmental, government-to-government activity, entertainment. China needs a Hollywood. All of this stuff is vital, or the technology won't get anywhere. And so we've been talking about this for years, and it frustrates a lot of Chinese business people to no end. The Chinese government has got to get serious about addressing and getting their hands around the issue of soft power. In the book, we have some smaller companies and mid-sized companies that are doing revolutionary things in prop tech. I think China will be an exporter of prop tech technology within the next year. Companies in the West are going to be wondering, what are these companies doing? And can this technology transfer to Canada, America, South America, Europe, Scandinavia?
Very interesting. Yeah, definitely a lack of trust, I think, between the two countries. And you hit on it with the soft power thing, maybe something that people don't think about as much. Yifan, I guess we'll give you a chance here to lay out some predictions and some thoughts.
Actually, I really, totally agree with Paul's, China's soft power thing. It's, China is really, really bad at that. Okay. But one thing, it's also changing. Let me make an example with BSN, how the partnership works. BSN basically built, funded by 4 partners, State Information Center, which is a government agency, China Mobile, and the China UnionPay, which are SOEs, big SOEs, and Reddit is a pure private company. Okay, there's, the private hold. I mean, usually how the SOE and the private company work together in China, the usual way is the SOE pays the private company to do the work. Okay, that actually makes the private company, basically it's, they don't usually innovate, because they get paid to do what they are good at, but they won't really do anything outside the payments. That's actually a problem, because SOE is a little bit reluctant to innovate, because there's still process, there's approval process. It's a little bit hard for SOE to really do something totally new. But the private company is capable of doing that, but the relationship cannot be payments. So how Reddit and China Mobile, China UnionPay working together is we actually invest into this together. So that's why whatever we develop belong to Reddit. That's why we innovate. And China Mobile, they also invest into the infrastructure. We contribute the software, the technology. The China Mobile contribute the resources. China UnionPay contribute their knowledge in the financial, and also they build the application on top of BSN. And the State Information Center basically manage everything, make sure everything is legal and in compliance with regulations. So this is actually how we're working together. And like today, I can freely come here to say my opinion. This is soft power, okay? Because by the SOE, private sector, government agency, by working together, that's actually one way to, solve the problem of the soft power thing. Because I can come here if I'm paid by the government and I'm paid by the SOEs. There's no way I come here talk about like this. Okay, because we are equal partners. This is actually very unique in China, and that's also how we push BSN so faster, very, very fast and very, very efficient. It's a partnership. Actually, as Paul emphasized last time we talked, it's the private public sector working together. This is new, but you see how China become. They really not really everything rely on the SOEs. It's by working together, make best of out of everybody, contribute together, become a stronger power. That's something I want to emphasize here, using BSN as an example.
Okay, thank you, Yifan. I'm going to give the two guest speakers here, Winston and Paul, a chance to add some closing thoughts, and also please do share any relevant information if people want to find out more about your books or your personal social media channels or anything that you might have. So I guess we'll go ahead and we'll start with Winston if you would like to add some closing thoughts and then share some information.
Sure. I have a 5-book book series on China's tech revolution, starting from 2016 book, China's Mobile Economy, to 2021 book, right, The Digital War, How China's Tech Power Shapes the Future of AI, Blockchain, and Cyberspace. And I envision that going forward with more tech revolution kicking in, there has to be more. I learned a new word, pentalogy. That's like a trilogy is for 3 books. Pentalogy is for 5 books. I just don't know what's the word for 6 books yet. But you can find my books on Amazon, and I share my media interviews and new research on LinkedIn and Twitter a lot. So please find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Love to continue this dialogue with you, Ben, and all the audience, please.
Excellent. Thank you. And once again, that's Winston Ma. You can look him up on LinkedIn or Twitter. Paul, do you want to take over?
Yeah, so this is my 4th book on the U.S.-China relationship. The first one was FinTech, which looked at the traditional U.S. banking system relative to China. The second one was on AI and quantum computing between the U.S. and China. Last year was a lot of the social and technological issues on 5G between China and America. And this book is really on PropTech. And I think PropTech is really nothing more than the evolution of financial and FinTech, if you want to call it, and InsurTech. And I think watching Ping An very carefully and JD very carefully is key. The book is The Digital Transformation of Property in Greater China. It's published by the Singapore University of Social Sciences series, which I'm part of, and where I teach. And I'll be doing a course next week on the 10th and 11th, free. If you can do a donation to the SUSS, that would be great. I'll be doing a 2-day course, and I'll be having some special guests as well, speakers. So pay attention to SUSS EDU for the 2-day course next week on the 10th and 11th on the book. Very important topic. And I've done a very long, almost a book on BSN, which I think is a fascinating phenomenon. Pay close attention to it. I think Facebook's DM is interesting, but it can't even hold a candle to what BSN is up to. And of course, I think the reason why we've had this massive rally in crypto was because of the launch of BSN and the use of so many cryptocurrencies on the BSN network. I think that's what triggered a lot of this rally that got out of hand. And so I think that the way in which BSN is handled, the way in which the e-currency from the central bank is handled by way of soft power is critical to China's future.
But everyone, it's been a real pleasure having this discussion. These are some real illuminating topics, and I think the audience, particularly around like the geopolitical side, are going to be fascinated about some of the realities that are in play here. A little bit disappointed that we didn't get a chance to dive into the more blockchain-focused topics. So I guess, Yifan, you're going to have to schedule another call at some point or something like that so we can do a deep dive.
Exactly.
I'm there.
Totally.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Winston.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you so much, Yifan. Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.